Hello, this is Bill Webb, aka Billy Indiana. Today I'm going to do a partial playthrough and review for Santorini by Gordon Hamilton, published by Roxley Games and Spin Master Games. We'll also talk a little bit about the Golden Fleece expansion. Let's get it to the table. Alright, so I've got all the components out for both the base game and the Golden Fleece expansion, and I'm going to try to walk you through from the very beginner level, which I found is kind of lacking online. I haven't found a lot of people explaining just the beginner level, so I'll start there, and then I'll just give you a little bit of an introduction onto how you would play with the God setup from the base game, how you would play with the Golden Fleece two-player variant in the expansion, and how you'd play with the Hero variant in the expansion. But what I have set out here is materials for all of it. So for the base game, you just need the player board here. You need two characters, two workers for each player. I'm just going to show you a two-player variant or two-player setup and playthrough, partial playthrough. The game actually says in its directions that there is a 3- and 4-player variant, but that it's recommended as a two-player game. And then I've got the base of the buildings pieces here, and then the second tier level and the third tier level, and then the domes. And then all of these cards and the RAM token we'll save for later. Those are all parts of the either God setup or the Golden Fleece expansion setup. So we'll save those for now. So for the base, you just need the base levels, middle levels, top levels, domes, your workers, and the game board. Now to start, in the base game it says that the youngest player gets to place their workers first, and so we'll say the gray player is the youngest player, and let's say they decide they're going to take the middle spot and the corner spot. And then the other player gets to place their workers, and let's say they decide they're just going to take these two corners. All right, so they've placed their workers. Now the goal of the game is to get your worker to the top level, so you need to build a base and then get a second level and get a third level on there. And then you need to get your worker up to that top level. And the first player to get their worker to the top level would win. You could always close off those buildings, though, by putting a dome on top. And you can climb on the buildings you've built or the buildings your opponents built. All the spaces and all the building steps are open movement areas for anyone, as long as they're not occupied by another worker or closed off by a dome. So the domes actually close off the building so that they can't be climbed on anymore. The limitations of the movement for the workers, the worker can go in any of the 8 squares surrounding their position. So this one right here in the middle of the board could go to any of these 8 spots. This player actually can only go to these 3 because they've chosen a corner, so they're a little bit limited in where they can go. And you always are going to move and then build. After you move, you build, and just like you can move into any of these 8 spots around your current position, once you've moved, then you can build in any of the next 8 spots. So if this person moves here, they could build in any of these 8 spots, right? So that is how you would move and then build, and the limitations to that, and we'll demonstrate it as we go forward. And again, you're just trying to get your worker to the 3rd level of a stat or of a building before any of your opponents can. In this case, just one opponent for a 2-player. Now you can always move up a level one at a time, but you can only move one at a time in the upward. You can't jump 2 levels. When you're coming down, you can drop as many levels as you want. So let me just walk you through a few rounds to give you a feel for how the game plays. So since the younger player, the gray player, placed their workers first, the other player gets to go first. So let's say that this player moves here, and they put a base here in the corner. You always have to have a base down before you can put a 2nd or 3rd level, obviously. And that's their turn. You can choose either worker to move when it's your turn. And let's say that this player decides to move up this side and put a base in the corner. And that's their move. And let's say that this worker now decides to move here and put another base here. And this worker is going to move here and put another base there. So you just have a move and a build every time. Now I'm going to have this guy move his worker up 1, and now that he's adjacent, he can put a 2nd level. And he wouldn't actually have to be on this level. He could be on the ground level and still build the 2nd level. I just wanted to get him adjacent because it has to be in one of the adjacent spots before you can build there. All right. This player is going to actually move this person this actually just have them move this direction, but they are going to build the second level here. All right, this player is going to start to move across to see if maybe they can interfere on that side, but they are going to build here. So they're actually going to build the third level, but they can't get up on there yet because you can't jump 2 levels. This player is going to move here and build here. This player is going to move here and build here. This player is going to move here and put a dome on this one to keep it from being accessed by that blue player. This player is going to jump up and put a second layer here. This player is going to go here to potentially offer some defense later. And they are going to build a base here. This player is going to move here and build the third layer. This player is going to move here and cap off that dome so that that person can't get on top. And so it's just a sequence of moving, building, and you're trying to put yourself into a position where eventually you can get your worker up to the top to an undomed third level and get your worker on that third level. So it's a pretty easy game to learn. You're just going to be moving and building, and you're always looking at those adjacent spots all the way around where your worker is. And you can move either worker and build by either worker, but it has to be adjacent to your worker. And it's a strategy game of trying to figure out how you can build in such a way that your opponent either has 2 things they need to block but can't block both, or to pin it into a corner such that you can maybe block them from getting close enough to putting a dome. So for instance, if this worker had been here and we had a taller building there, and let's say that this dome wasn't there yet. Okay, so this worker can't get to this corner quick enough to put a dome on there to prevent him from climbing. So this worker could put a layer here, and this worker could move here and build here, but they can't get close enough. So if you can try to corner it in such a way that they don't have time to get their worker close enough to cap it off before you can get to that third level, that would be another strategy. So lots of different ways you can try to corner and block. Because the worker can never move up 2 layers, a 2-layer building can block their movement sometimes. And because they can never be where another worker can be, if I also had just blocked this spot with one of my workers, they couldn't get there to put a dome on that top level. And so at this point, there's no way for this worker to get close enough to stop that, to put a cap on that third level. So just some strategies like that as you're moving the players around and creating those opportunities, trying to be the first player to get your worker to the top. So that is the base game of Santorini. And after the rules suggest that after you've played a couple times, then you would move on to the God Power setup. And let me show you something in the manual here. In the instructions booklet, there's a group of simple gods and advanced gods. So you can see the purple simple gods here. There are 10 of them. They're a little bit easier to use and a little bit easier to understand. And then we've got another 19 advanced gods. They're a little bit more complicated, a little bit more challenging, and they basically bend the rules of the game. So for instance, I'll just read a couple of them to you here. So for Apollo, on your move, your worker may move into an opponent's worker's space using normal movement rules. So you still have to only move in an adjacent direction, but you can go where there is another worker. And you can force that worker that you've just moved into to vacate. So basically you're swapping positions with them. So that would be a feature that a power that Apollo would have. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Your move, your worker may move 1 additional time, but not back to the space it started on, so you get an extra move. Athena, goddess of wisdom. If one of your workers moved up on your last turn, opponent workers cannot move up on this turn. So another way you could block them from moving up to that third level and maybe give you more time to move a worker over and block them off. So those are just a few of the simple God powers. And then in the advanced God powers, just a couple. Let's see. Ares, God of War. End of your turn, you may remove an unoccupied block, not a dome, neighboring your unmoved worker. You also may remove any tokens on that block. And so you can actually take pieces off the board with that one. We can look at Eros here, God of Desire. Place your workers anywhere along opposite edges of the board. That's how you set up. They have to be on opposite sides. And then the win condition, you also win if one of your workers moves to a space neighboring your other worker, and both are on top of level 1 blocks or at the same height level in a 3-player game. So lots of different ways to bend the rules of the game and to create even different win conditions using these God cards. And the God cards are these 30 that come in the base game, and you can see that they just all have really nice art. If you want to see close-ups of all the art, I do have an unboxing video where you can see all the art close up, but these are those 30 God cards in the base game. And so that is how you would play a beginner game without the God cards. And then to use the God cards, you actually deal a God out to each one. I think in the rules it says that you're supposed to have a challenger, and the challenger picks a God for every player available in the game. So if it's a 2-player, they're going to pick 2. If it's a 3-player game, they're going to pick 3. And then they choose who gets to pick the gods first, and they get last pick. And then after everyone has their gods and understands the rules that their gods bend in the game, then that challenger, the player who's sort of setting up the god setup game, is going to decide who goes first, even if they choose themselves to put their workers on the board. So it's a slightly different setup, but pretty similar gameplay. It's just that you have now different rules at hand to use while you're trying to accomplish the same goal. Or, like I said, you may have different win conditions. Now in the Golden Fleece expansion, it comes with more gods, and so these also have that same backing as these did. And it has several new gods. It has 6 of them that have a little golden fleece emblem up here in the top. And so you can see these 6 gods. If you're playing with the Golden Fleece expansion, it's limited to 2 players. And basically, you're going to choose one of these Golden Fleece gods, and you're going to put it beside the board. And as you're doing the setup, you're also going to have this ram, this Golden Fleece ram on the board. And if you have a worker beside the ram when it's your turn, you can use that power. That's basically the Golden Fleece expansion, is using the power that is from this Golden Fleece god whenever your worker is by the ram on the board. Then there's also the hero variant for 2-player, and you're not supposed to play with the ram and the hero variants together. It's one or the other. The heroes have purple backs instead of the blue backs like the regular gods. And the heroes have weaker powers, but you deal out a hero to each player, and you can see the art is similar. And they all have a special power, a special ability. They're not generally as powerful or as grand as the gods themselves. But you have these powers to be used, but you only get to use it once per game. So it's sort of like a baby step up from the base beginner game to just use a simpler power and only be able to use it once per game. I guess maybe you could think it's a challenge because you got to time the use of that power at just the right moment. So a few different variants in how you can play the game, whether you're using the Golden Fleece RAM expansion features or just the base game. So hopefully that makes sense and you understand how the game would be played and what the different options are, whether you have just the base game or whether you add the Golden Fleece expansion. Now let me tell you a little bit about what I think of Santorini. So when I give a rating for a game and a review, I use these 6 categories that you can see on the screen: the production, the theme, mechanisms and decision making, game flow, how replayable it is, and then sort of my personal value of the game. How would I just rank it in my collection as to whether I would want to keep it, trade it away, or it's one of my top games. And I give each category a 0 if I think it's really lost on that portion or that ratings part of the system, a 1 if I think it's solid but not excellent, and a 2 if I think it's one of the greatest in my opinion. And so for the first category, production, I would definitely give Santorini a 2. I think the features. The components are really high quality. They're beautiful. The plastic is nice and solid. It doesn't feel flimsy. All the little structures feel like they're going to last. The little miniatures are pretty detailed for such a small game. And then the art is beautiful. The board is beautiful. I think the production's great. So I would definitely give it a 2 out of 2 on production. In terms of theme, I think the theme matches, so I don't think it's terrible. And I think they've tried to incorporate it in. Obviously, I don't know exactly how it connects to Santorini exactly. I don't know enough about the history of Santorini to know if there is some sort of connection to why this theme would match that location. But I do know that they're trying to make it clear that the gods have different powers and they're bending the rules of this world. So there's some connection, but when I'm playing the game, I'm not really feeling immersed in that theme. I don't feel like I'm a god or a hero. I just feel like I'm trying to beat my opponent and outmaneuver and use those special characteristics and abilities that the god card gives me. So I think it's a 1 for me for theme. It's clear, but it's not immersive. And then for mechanisms and decision making, to me, I think it's a 2. It's really simple to learn, but it's very challenging, kind of like chess-like. You're trying to outmaneuver, you're trying to outthink, you're thinking multiple steps ahead. And then when you start adding in the different god powers or hero powers or the Golden Fleece expansion where you have to get your worker by the Golden Fleece or by the ram to be able to use the power, there's a lot of decisions to be made and there's a lot of planning. So I think there's not a ton of mechanisms, but for decision making, it's very deep. And there's just enough mechanisms and variety kind of leading into the replayability that I think the depth of decision making, even if you're just playing the very beginner basic game, it's still kind of chess-like in that way. So I feel like that's a 2 for me as well. For game flow, I think it's really good too. It's going to move pretty quickly. It's recommended for only 2 players, and no matter whose turn it is, even if you're playing with more than 2 players, you're really paying attention and trying to think ahead of how they're moving and how you can block and how you can maneuver. So you're going to be engaged the entire time. You're never just waiting for someone to finish their turn. And so the game flow is pretty smooth. I suppose that it could be for someone who's AP prone, a scenario where you might be sitting for a long time waiting for someone to make their decision. But again, that comes to more with who you play with and how quickly they're going to go. I did think when I was playing with one player who was a little bit more analysis paralysis prone, I thought, you could use like a chess timer and say you have to make your decision within that amount of time if that became a problem. So I feel like game flow is really pretty good, pretty snappy, and you could even overcome the AP prone player just because it feels so much chess-like. I think a chess timer would work well. And then for replayability, I think with just the base game, I think it's still very replayable because you have 30 different gods, and there's what was it? I think 10 or 11. I think there was 10 or 11 that were the simple gods, and then 19 or 20 that were the advanced gods. And so you've got a lot of variability, a lot of different combinations. And if you get the Golden Fleece, then you've got a couple different 2-player variants that give little twists and more god cards and some hero cards that give it that extra variant, like I mentioned. So quite a bit of replayability even in the base game, and then with the expansion, even more so. The gameplay is still going to feel the same, but you're always going to have to be thinking differently with the different gods and heroes that you would employ. And so I feel like replayability is definitely a 2. And the final category for personal value, I think for me, because I really love theme and feeling immersed in a game, I can't feel like I'm going to give it a 2. It's not the kind of game that I would just be pulling off the shelf all the time, but it's a game I'll definitely keep. I do enjoy it, and every once in a while I just want that sort of chess-like feel and just a matchup that way. And so I'll definitely be keeping it on the shelf. And especially with this Golden Fleece, I like the couple of little 2-player variants because we do usually play it 2-player. So I think this is definitely a keeper, but it's not like in the top 20, 25, 30 games of my overall game collection. So it's a 1 for me on personal value. So overall, that gives it a score of 10, which is really quite good and kind of surprising because when I first saw the game, I wasn't sure it was something I would like. And even the first few times I played it, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. But the more I've played it, the more comfortable I've gotten with using the different god cards and the different hero cards and trying to manipulate and think through those new challenges, the puzzly nature of it and the chess-like nature of it has appealed to me more and more. And so initially I wouldn't have expected it would have rated so high, but now that I've played it enough, I do think a 10 is a solid score that makes sense for my evaluation of this game. So I hope that overview, the sort of partial playthrough just to give you a feel for the game, and then the review and rating was helpful for you. If it was, I'd love it if you would click that like button down below, and if you'd like to subscribe, that would be great. If you want to get notifications of future videos, click on that bell icon. And I'd love to hear some comments from you. If you like Santorini, if there's something about this game you really enjoy, if there's certain gods or heroes that you prefer to use, leave those comments below. If you play the new version, I don't even know for sure if it's out, but I think it's like Santorini, New York, kind of the Santorini game, but in New York. I don't know much about it, but if you do, maybe leave a comment about that or tell me if you're looking forward to that game. As always, thanks for watching. This is Bill, Indiana, signing off.